Good afternoon everyone and welcome to a tech video. This here is the Trigkey Speed S Mini PC. It's a really interesting little system which features a Ryzen 7 5700U 8-core 16-thread processor which turbos up to 4.3 GHz. It also has 16 GB of DDR4 RAM and a 500 GB NVMe drive. So I recently purchased this as sort of like a small PC I could use. I had to do some smaller stuff on rather than turn on my main desktop PC. And I received this yesterday, bought it from Amazon, cost me £279 with a £80 voucher off. And I've been using it for the last day or so, and it is actually pretty fantastic. First of all, I love the small size of this thing. It's really hard to sort of show you how small this is really in comparison to PCs with similar power and similar processors. But this is actually a really nice small little unit, and I have so far had quite a lot of fun on testing games and other things like that. I did an unboxing video of it yesterday, but unfortunately I wasn't particularly happy with the video quality of that. That's something I'm going to work on. Hopefully today's is a little bit better. And what I'm going to do today is I've set everything up, so Windows is on, all of the programs I need on, I've installed Steam and other things like that. And I'm going to be testing a few games on it and let you know how useful it actually is for gaming. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the full specs up on screen now, and then we're simply just going to get straight into it. Okay, so first up is GTA 5 on the PC. This ran actually quite well. You can see the frame rate in there is hovering in the 40s. It's at 1080p with 5/6 scale resolution. Everything else turned to low. And bear in mind that this is essentially a laptop processor with Radeon Vega 8 integrated graphics. I had a really good time playing this. The game didn't really have any significant stutters or anything else like that, and it was a fairly smooth experience even when I headed towards the downtown area. Now I've captured this footage off monitor today, as I've not yet set up everything that I need to connect it to my capture card and things like that. That's something I will be doing in the future, but for the sake of convenience today I've simply recorded off monitor, and I'll also be setting up the average 1% and 0.1% frame rate lows of these. But as you can see here, GTA 5 played really nicely. It's more than playable with low settings at 1080p 5/6 scale. And if you cap the frame rate to 30, the experience would be at the very least consistent rather than a little bit up and a little bit down. So you can see I'm driving here and we're down to 33 FPS. And then it goes up and sort of deviates a little bit from that. So if you cap the frame rate on that, that would be more than the playable experience, as the 30 FPS cap would hide some of these ups and downs of the frame rate. But yeah, it was a very nice, smooth experience and more than playable on this hardware. It's a pretty fantastic piece of kit. Next up is Killing Floor 2. Killing Floor 2's graphical settings were 1080p, with everything else set to low, with the exception of textures, which on this case I did set to medium. The game played more than fine again. You can see from the frame rate numbers here, we're well over 60 FPS. I think this is one of those games that really requires a higher frame rate. I played this on the Xbox One originally when it came out, and it was a bit hit and miss in terms of performance on the original Xbox One. This is one of those games that really does sort of require a pretty consistent frame rate. Anything above 60 is fine. It's a fast-paced shooter, and again on this Ryzen 7 5700U, it looks and performs pretty well. I really enjoyed playing this as well. It had no significant issues to speak of. Again, you could cap the frame rate to 60 FPS here to sort of mitigate any of these sort of increases in frame rate and decreases, but I honestly could not see anything that was off-putting even when the frame rate varied between sort of 75 to 88 frames. It was difficult to actually tell that the frame rate had changed in between those numbers. So you could put a 60 FPS cap on this. I don't see much point really. The smoother the game, the better it's going to feel. So this was another good result for the Ryzen 7 5700U with Radeon Vega 8 integrated graphics, and we are going to go on to the next game now. So next up is the Division 2, playing at 1080p with a 75% resolution scale. Everything is set to low. Unfortunately, I couldn't get MSI Afterburner to display during this. The first time I loaded it up, I received a warning about something failing to initialize. I turned off MSI Afterburner and the game loaded up absolutely fine. But that means that I can't see any metrics on the top left hand side of the screen here. I did check in AMD Adrenalin after I recorded this footage. I'll put that on the screen now, and it says that the average frame rate was still fairly decent. It was around 42 frames a second, I believe, and this again was more than a playable experience. This is another one of those games that you could cap to 30 FPS for a more consistent experience. In the case of the Division 2, I would recommend that you do that, as the frame rate change between 35 FPS and 45 FPS did feel a little sluggish in the controls, because the lower the frame rate, the longer it seems to be in terms of your kind of input delay, I guess. It's hard to describe. I'm sure I could explain it a little better, but I just can't figure out how to right now. But I would cap this game to 30 FPS. Again, it's more than playable on this thing. Remember that this is essentially a laptop integrated graphics unit. These things, they are fantastic. AMD makes some excellent APUs, and they've always been well ahead of their offerings from rivals such as Intel. And this really sort of showcases how far AMD have actually taken their integrated graphics to the point where it's more than playable, and you might not even need a discrete GPU to attain playable frame rates. So that's fantastic. Best of all, though, it makes gaming more accessible to everyone, which is always a good thing. It's great that people can buy one of these and play some games on hardware which they might not have thought they would be able to play games. So in terms of a gaming accessibility standpoint, it's fantastic news for everyone all around. Anyway, let's move on to the next game. Okay, so the next game is Counter-Strike 2. I admit to not being very good at this. It's been a very long time since I played Counter-Strike in any kind of competitive form. The last time I really played Counter-Strike was probably CS 1.5, and we're talking a very long time ago here. Again, MSI Afterburner wouldn't work to show me in-game metrics for display FPS and things like that. But it seemed like a very smooth experience. Unfortunately, AMD Adrenalin also did not give me any information as to the average frame rate for this. So I can only go off what my eyes can see right now anyway. It played smoothly enough. There was no issues. This is at 1080p with everything set to low. The only thing I did notice was a potential problem. I'm not sure whether this is a game-related problem or a system-related problem. Was when you went to arm the bomb, the frame rate kind of hitched for a moment. It was an ever so slight stutter while you were arming, and I did repeat it again. This is something that I managed to repeat on the next round. It did seem to cause an issue both times that I did it. I'm not sure whether that's a system-related thing or a game-related thing. If someone knows, let me know in the comments. But overall, this played pretty well. It's more than playable enough. As for the game being on low settings, Counter-Strike is one of those games that I think people are going to want the most FPS from. It's a highly competitive online shooter, and people are going to want as many frames as it can get from this. So when I'll be testing Counter-Strike 2 in the future on different systems, it will always be at low, as I feel that that's what people are going to want to play it at. They're not going to set it to high and potentially risk taking 60 frames off their frame rate in an online competitive shooter. So I think that low's the perfect spot for something like this, at the very least. One of the things worth mentioning, very briefly, is that the system is fairly cool. With it being in an enclosed case, it can get quite hot. But when you're just web browsing and things like that, the system generally tends to stay cool. It's only really when you're putting it under serious load that the temperature can reach 80 plus degrees, which is quite warm for a processor. But remember, these are parts designed to be in small enclosed spaces, and I believe that this one's safe up to 90-ish degrees. I'd have to double check on that. I did see 84, 85 degrees on this thing when I put it under 100% load, and it did make an audible noise. I'll put that in now. Although that sounds louder than it actually was, compared to everything going on in the background. Anyway, this has been a brief video. I hope to follow this up with a more detailed video in the very near future. These are just my initial impressions of this unit. Also coming up on my channel is going to be the £35 PC, which we've already upgraded a little bit. That's going to go on the bench, and I'm going to pair that with a Radeon RX 460 2GB and see what it can do. So we're going to be doing work on that as well. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. If you liked this video, let me know. And if you didn't, let me know what I can improve. Thank you, and see you soon.